In 1905, Sigmund Freud published 3 essays on the theory of sexuality and said something that scandalized the intellectual world. Children, from the moment of birth, have a form of sexuality. Not adult sexuality, but a developmental sexuality, a sequence of stages in which erotic energy, which Freud called libido, attaches to different body zones and generates the experiences and conflicts that will ultimately shape the adult personality. Freud's theory of psychosexual development is one of the most controversial frameworks in the history of psychology, widely criticized for being unscientific, culturally biased, and based on clinical observations from a specific historical context rather than controlled research. It is also one of the most influential, introducing concepts like the Oedipus complex, fixation, and the oral personality that have become part of the cultural vocabulary, whatever one thinks of the underlying theory. Freud believed that the libido, the psychic energy associated with the pleasure-seeking drives, moves through a predictable sequence of bodily zones during development, and that the way conflicts at each stage are resolved shapes the personality in lasting ways. Unresolved conflicts at any stage produce fixation, a partial arrest of development in which some of the libido remains tied to the dynamics of that stage, influencing behavior in adulthood through characteristic patterns. The first stage is the oral stage, running from birth to about 18 months. At this stage, the infant's primary source of pleasure, and the primary zone through which libido operates, is the mouth, sucking, eating, biting. The central conflict is weaning, the transition from breast to other sources of nourishment and comfort. A fixation at the oral stage, whether through excessive frustration or excessive gratification, produces what Freud called the oral character, a personality marked by issues around dependency, trust, and oral habits, smoking, eating, talking excessively. The dependent person who seems always to be seeking nourishment from others, the cynical, biting person whose wit has an edge, both, in Freud's analysis, show traces of oral fixation. The second stage is the anal stage, from about 18 months to 3 years. The focus shifts to the processes of retention and expulsion, centered on toilet training, the child's first experience of external control over internal bodily functions, and the first significant arena of conflict between the child's wishes and parental demands. Freud proposed 2 types of anal character emerging from fixation here: the anal retentive type, characterized by orderliness, obstinacy, and parsimony, and the anal expulsive type, characterized by messiness, generosity, and creative expression. While the literal mechanism is not taken seriously in modern psychology, the general observation that issues around control, orderliness, and autonomy have developmental roots has found support in more contemporary attachment and temperament research. The third stage, from about 3 to 6 years, is the phallic stage, and it is here that Freud's theory becomes most controversial. The child's sexual curiosity intensifies and becomes directed toward the genitals and toward the parent of the opposite sex. Freud described the Oedipus complex in boys. The child develops desire for the mother and perceives the father as a rival, giving rise to castration anxiety, the fear of punishment from the father, which ultimately resolves through identification with the father and internalization of his moral standards. This resolution installs the superego, the conscience, and allows the boy to become a morally socialized being. Freud's parallel account for girls, the Electra complex, was less developed and even more contested, involving penis envy and a different pathway of resolution. The fourth stage, from about 6 to puberty, is the latency period. Sexual drives go underground, and the child focuses on social and intellectual development. The final stage, genital, begins with puberty and marks the emergence of mature adult sexuality. Ideally, the capacity for genuine love and reciprocal sexual partnership. If earlier stages were successfully navigated, the adult can now move toward authentic intimacy. If fixations remain, the adult personality will be colored by the unresolved dynamics of whichever stage was incompletely traversed. Most psychologists today do not accept Freud's specific psychosexual theory. The notion that libido moves through these specific zones in this specific sequence, and that adult personality is shaped primarily by the resolution of these specific conflicts, has not been empirically validated and reflects the cultural assumptions of early 20th century Vienna as much as any universal human truth. What endures is the larger insight that early childhood experiences matter profoundly, that conflicts and ways of managing them have developmental roots, and that the unconscious dimensions of personality are shaped before we have any conscious memory or understanding. The framework is disputed. The insight it was reaching for has proven far more durable. Subscribe to Psychology. Theories explained for more psychology breakdowns every week.